19. Black R&B legends who died mysteriously and tragically. 19. Black R&B legends died young, and the official stories don't add up. Car crashes with missing evidence, overdoses with bruises, falls from windows that barely open, hitmakers who tried to own their music, silenced right before exposing the truth. These were not just tragedies, they were warnings. The deeper you look, the darker it gets. Why do so many black icons die at their peak, right when they gain power or try to speak out? Accident or orchestration? If you think you know the music industry, watch this before you decide. Hit subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, and let's uncover the truth they tried to bury. Jesse Belvin. They were hailed as pioneers, idols, and revolutionaries, yet their final moments were filled with silence, suspicion, and unfinished truths. Jesse Belvin, known as the Lullaby Prince, wasn't just a crooner of love songs. He used his voice as a weapon against segregation. At only 27, he made history by performing at Arkansas's first integrated concert, where death threats flooded in backstage. Hours later, his car exploded on a dark road, killing both him and his wife. The official report blamed brake failure, yet a mechanic later confirmed the front tire had been loosened. Even more disturbing, his final song promoting unity, "Let's Sit Together," vanished from the label archives, as if someone wanted both the man and his message erased forever. Jesse was not the only one silenced after defying the system. Many black R&B legends died young right after making bold, creative, or political moves. Billy Stewart crashed into a river weeks after preparing an album about injustice. Sam Cooke, one of the first black artists to own his masters, was shot 3 times and declared a self-defense case. Otis Redding, on the verge of superstardom, died in a plane crash under clear weather. Some deaths looked like accidents. Others were called overdoses, heart attacks, or mental breakdowns. But behind these labels were missing tapes, stolen diaries, and medical files sealed away. Patterns emerged: artists who wanted freedom suddenly lost everything. In other cases, the industry's neglect was as deadly as any weapon. Florence Ballard, the co-founder of the Supremes, died at 32 in poverty after being forced out of her own group. Jackie Wilson collapsed on stage and was left in a coma for 9 years with minimal care. David Ruffin was dumped lifeless at a hospital with bruises and no ID. Minnie Riperton delayed life-saving treatment amid pressure to maintain her image. Tammy Terrell's brain tumor was likely worsened by physical abuse that was ignored. These artists weren't protected, they were exploited until their bodies gave out. And when they were gone, their masters' royalties and stories were often taken by others. Together, these 19 losses reveal a chilling truth. Many black R&B legends didn't simply die. They were silenced, discarded, or forgotten by a system that profited from their talent but never protected their lives. Their endings were full of unanswered questions, missing evidence, conflicting testimonies, erased recordings. These were not isolated events. They were warnings written in blood and music. And today, we must ask, were these tragedies or carefully hidden crimes? If we do not speak their names loudly, the truth behind their deaths will remain buried, just like their unreleased songs. Billy Stewart. Billy Stewart was more than a powerhouse voice. He was a visionary who wanted to reshape R&B with fearless truth. Known for his rapid-fire vocal style and hits like Summertime, he had already proven his genius by the late 1960s. But success wasn't enough. In 1969, he began planning a daring album titled Thick Soul, a politically charged project about racism, poverty, and the exploitation of black musicians. He told friends this album would wake people up, and insiders claimed he was preparing to expose record label corruption. But the industry didn't welcome his boldness. Executives wanted love songs, not revolution. And just when Billy prepared to take full creative control, tragedy struck in a way that felt too convenient. On January 17, 1970, Billy and 3 band members were traveling to perform when their car suddenly veered off a bridge into the News River in North Carolina. The water was shallow, the weather was calm, and the driver was experienced, yet no one survived. Their bodies were later recovered, bloated, and unrecognizable. The official cause brake failure due to ice. But there was one chilling detail that police never reported to the public. At 8:00 a.m. the same morning, Billy had called the stage manager and said, "Someone messed with my car last night. The front tire sounds wrong." That phone call vanished from records. No investigation followed. The case was closed in hours, as if no one wanted more questions asked. The mystery deepened after Billy's funeral. His family returned home to find their door broken open, but nothing valuable was stolen. Instead, every notebook and tape of his new songs was gone. These songs weren't love ballads. They were stories of black pain, inequality, and industry betrayal. When asked about Thick Soul, the record label claimed, "We've never heard of that project." Yet an anonymous studio technician later admitted he heard a rough track where Billy sang, "If I don't speak loud, will they bury me silent?" That song has never been recovered. Billy Stewart's death wasn't just a crash, it was the disappearance of a powerful voice right when he tried to tell the truth. He was only 32 years old, at the peak of his influence, ready to create something historic. Instead, his music was drowned, his story was muted, and his legacy was quietly sanitized. When an artist with something dangerous to say dies before they can say it, we must ask, was it fate or was he silenced? King Curtis. King Curtis was not just a saxophonist, he was the sound of the 1960s. His horn roared on hits with Aretha Franklin, Otis Redding, and the Coasters. His live shows were electric, his solos unforgettable, and his influence unmatched. But behind the stage lights, Curtis was growing fearless. In 1971, he began recording a controversial song titled "Starlight Riot," a raw commentary on police brutality and racial violence in America. At a time when black artists were expected to entertain, not expose, Curtis chose courage over silence. And that decision may have cost him everything. Friends said he was proud of the track, but also cautious because weeks before its release, the threatening phone calls started. "If you release that song, we will silence your saxophone forever." On the night of August 13, 1971, Curtis returned to his Manhattan apartment after a studio session. A stranger, later identified as Juan Montanez, stood blocking the entrance. When Curtis told him to move, an argument broke out. Within seconds, the man pulled a knife and stabbed Curtis twice in the chest, leaving blood pouring down the steps of his own home. Police called it a random altercation, but nothing felt random. Curtis was calm, disciplined, and rarely confrontational. Why was a stranger waiting exactly at his door? Why did the threats stop the moment he died? And why did the most important track of his career suddenly disappear? In the days after his death, the truth became even darker. Starlight Riot was pulled from the album without explanation. Radio stations refused to play it. The record label terminated his contract and buried the project. A handwritten note found in his apartment read, "I know I'm making music they don't want to hear, but if I stay quiet, who will speak for the children in the dark?" That note vanished into private archives. It never saw the light of day. Curtis was only 37 years old, healthy, successful, and rising higher than ever. His death was treated like an isolated tragedy. But many musicians whispered another belief: he wasn't just killed, he was silenced. King Curtis's murder wasn't only the loss of a legend, it was a message to every black artist who dared to tell the truth. When a voice that powerful is stabbed on his own doorstep and his music disappears the next day, that is not coincidence. That is censorship, written in blood. Johnny Ace. Johnny Ace was the sound of young black America in the early 1950s. With a velvet voice and timeless ballads like "Pledging My Love," he became the first R&B idol to send teenage girls into tears and radio stations into frenzy. At just 25, he was touring non-stop, selling out venues and reshaping the love song forever. But behind the adoration, Johnny was exhausted, trapped in unfair contracts, battling with his management over money he was owed and quietly planning to take control of his own music. That decision marked him as a threat. Days before Christmas 1954, he reportedly received an anonymous letter with a chilling message: "Stay quiet if you want your family safe." He kept working anyway. Fame had made him powerful, but danger was already closing in. On Christmas Eve 1954, after performing at Houston's City Auditorium, Johnny went backstage to relax with bandmates. Moments later, a gunshot shattered the room. Johnny Ace lay slumped in a chair, blood pouring from his head. Police immediately ruled it an accident, claiming he was playing Russian roulette, but the story fell apart instantly. Band members insisted Johnny hated guns. He never joked with weapons, never gambled with his life. Even worse, the gun did not belong to him. It was registered to his tour manager, the same man he had been arguing with over finances just days earlier. How does a man who despises firearms suddenly play with one he doesn't own? Witnesses reported hearing Johnny argue with an unidentified stranger minutes before he died. But that person was never identified, questioned, or even recorded in the official report. The investigation ended within hours. No autopsy was performed. No fingerprints were taken. The case was closed as self-inflicted before his body was even cold. His family immediately called it murder. His girlfriend, Olivia Gibbs, who sat beside him during the shooting, later said, "It didn't happen the way they said." But every time relatives pushed for answers, they received warnings to stop digging. Silence was safer. Within weeks, Johnny Ace's biggest hit was topping charts, while his death was treated like a joke in the media. No justice, no truth, just a story rewritten to protect someone. Johnny wasn't reckless. He was rising, independent, and ready to own his legacy. And just like too many black R&B legends after him, the moment he fought for control, his life ended in mystery. Bobby Fuller. Bobby Fuller was a rising star who fused rock and R&B into an explosive sound that electrified the 1960s. With his hit "I Fought the Law," he became a national sensation, a clean-cut rebel whose music captured the spirit of resistance. But behind his polished image, Bobby was fiercely independent. He wanted control over his recordings, his royalties, and his career, something record executives did not appreciate. In 1966, at only 23, he told close friends he was planning to expose corruption within his label and release music without their approval. He believed the industry was exploiting young artists and hiding dirty deals. Just weeks before his death, he said, "I'm done being quiet." That decision may have sealed his fate. On July 18, 1966, Bobby didn't show up for a scheduled studio session. His band members went looking for him. They found his blue Oldsmobile parked outside his Los Angeles apartment. The doors were unlocked. The smell of gasoline lingered in the air. Inside, Bobby sat slumped in the driver's seat. Body-scorched skin covered in bruises, shirt-torn face battered. A gas can sat beside him, but there were no burn marks on the car interior, no lighter, and no flames. Even more disturbing, there were marks on his wrists, as if he had been restrained. Yet police immediately ruled it suicide by asphyxiation. No homicide investigation, no suspects questioned. Case closed in hours. But nothing about the scene made sense. Bobby was cheerful the day before. He was planning a tour. His wallet was emptied and papers scattered as if someone searched for something specific. His personal tapes and handwritten notes, possibly containing evidence of label misconduct, vanished from his home the same week. When his mother begged the authorities to reopen the case, she was told to let it go. Insiders whispered that Bobby had powerful enemies in both the music business and the Los Angeles nightlife scene. Colleagues believed he was silenced before he could speak. Even stranger radio stations suddenly pulled "I Fought the Law" from rotation, claiming it was too sensitive after his death. His label distanced itself from him instantly and shelved his upcoming music. The young star who dared to challenge the system was erased with unsettling speed. To this day, no one has been held accountable. Bobby Fuller didn't die of despair. He died on the verge of exposing the truth. Donny Hathaway. Donny Hathaway was one of the most gifted soul voices in history, a genius whose voice could make joy feel holy and pain feel beautiful. Born in Chicago and trained in gospel and jazz, he rose to fame in the 1970s with timeless hits like A Song for You and stunning duets with Roberta Flack, including the Grammy-winning Where is the Love? Behind the scenes, Donny battled severe depression and schizophrenia. But even during his darkest periods, his creativity never faded. In January 1979, he reunited with Flack to record a new duet titled You Are My Heaven. The session went beautifully. Witnesses said Donny was smiling, joking, and excited to return to touring. He told friends he was finally ready to live again. Hours later, he was dead. On January 13, 1979, Donny was found on the glass roof of the second floor of New York's Essex House Hotel after falling from the 15th floor window of his room. Police quickly ruled it a suicide, blaming his mental illness. But those closest to him never believed it. First, he left no suicide note, even though he always wrote when emotional. Second, the hotel windows were designed not to open wide enough for someone to fall through. They had safety restrictors. For Donny to have gone out that window, it either had to be forced open or someone pushed him. A housekeeper reported hearing a loud crash in his room before the fall. Security entered the room minutes later. The radio was still playing. The furniture was slightly moved as if a struggle took place. Yet no forensic investigation followed. The strangest detail was found on his writing desk, a handwritten lyric draft with the line, "They want my voice, but not my truth." That paper disappeared shortly after. Roberta Flack said that hours before his death, Donny told her, "They're trying to take everything from me." Who were they? A manager, a label, a system. Donny had been fighting for creative control and higher royalties. He was worth millions but died nearly broke. Someone was profiting. He wasn't. Donny Hathaway didn't die like a man ready to give up. He died like a man on the edge of a breakthrough and possibly on the edge of exposing something. His voice soared through generations, but his death still echoes with silence and suspicion. Because when a brilliant artist falls from a window that barely opens, was it suicide or was he thrown out for telling too much truth? Junior Parker. Junior Parker was a blues and R&B treasure whose voice burned like smoldering coal, warm, hypnotic, and unforgettable. Born in Mississippi and raised in Memphis, he toured with B.B. King and influenced Elvis Presley, who covered his song Mystery Train. Yet while white artists gained fame from his music, Parker himself remained underpaid and underrecognized. By the late 1960s, he was still performing regularly and drawing loyal fans, even as the industry shifted toward younger acts. Despite living in constant pain from headaches, he remained optimistic, telling friends he had too much music left to give. When doctors recommended a routine brain surgery in 1971 to relieve pressure, Parker agreed, believing it would help him get back on stage stronger than ever. No one, not even his family, imagined it would be the last time they saw him alive. The operation was scheduled as a low-risk procedure expected to last only a few hours. Yet after surgery, the hospital made an unusual decision. Family members were barred from seeing him for 48 hours. They were told it was standard protocol, even though they had never heard of such restrictions before. Something felt off. A nurse later admitted she heard the lead surgeon yelling in the operating room because the wrong equipment had been set up. She believed a mistake had occurred, but was told to stay silent. When she tried to file a report, it disappeared. Junior's condition quickly worsened. A few days later, the hospital announced he had died from post-operative complications. No autopsy was performed. No investigation was opened. His family was devastated and suspicious. After his death, key details went missing. His medical files were incomplete. The surgeon refused interviews. The hospital claimed the case was closed. No one took responsibility. Friends insisted Junior had been healthy enough to perform just weeks earlier. They questioned why a simple surgery turned deadly. Rumors spread that he was experimenting with more personal, socially conscious music songs that spoke about injustice and the exploitation of black artists. Some even believed he was planning to regain ownership of his earlier recordings, which had made millions for others. If true, this meant Junior Parker was becoming financially independent, something the industry often resisted. In the end, Junior Parker died without the tribute he deserved. No major television coverage, no national memorial. His legacy was swallowed by the very system he helped build. But fans still ask the haunting question, did he die from a medical complication? Or was he silenced on the operating table? Because when a legend enters surgery healthy and never comes out and no one is held accountable, that is more than tragedy. It is mystery wrapped in silence. James Carr. James Carr was often called the most painful voice in soul history, not because of weakness, but because every note he sang carried the weight of a broken world. Born in Mississippi in 1942, he grew up singing gospel before recording haunting classics like The Dark End of the Street, a ballad so emotional, listeners said it felt like a confession. Unlike many stars of his era, James didn't chase fame. He chased truth. But behind that powerful voice was a lifelong battle with severe depression and schizophrenia. He spent years going in and out of hospitals, yet when he stepped up to the microphone, he was flawless. Even at his lowest, his talent was undeniable. The industry knew he was special, maybe too special. Because as he began planning a comeback in the late 1990s, strange things started happening. In his final months, James lived in Memphis with a relative who helped manage his care. Family members noticed that his medication suddenly tasted more bitter. When they tested a pill, the results were shocking. His lithium levels were 3 times higher than prescribed. Lithium overdose can cause heart failure, confusion, and sudden death. His doctor refused to explain the dosage change. Around the same time, the mini tape recorder James used to store new song ideas disappeared from his room. He panicked, telling relatives, "Someone is coming into my room at night." Because of his mental illness, no one believed him. But only days later, those warnings felt terrifyingly real. On January 7, 2001, James Carr was found unresponsive in his bed. There were no witnesses, no final words, no signs of distress. The death certificate said heart failure, but no autopsy was performed. No one questioned why a 58-year-old man with no history of heart disease died so suddenly. The family was still grieving when a stranger arrived at the house claiming to be a copyright agent. He demanded access to unreleased songs and lyric sheets. How did he know about them? Who sent him? The family refused, but some of James's unfinished music mysteriously appeared under other names years later. Someone clearly wanted his work, but not his story. James Carr's death felt less like the end of an illness, and more like the quiet removal of a genius no one could control. He wasn't famous enough to spark headlines, but he was important enough to be erased with precision. He sang the deepest truths of the soul, but the truth of his own final moments was buried. In life, he was ignored. In death, he was taken. And today, one question still lingers over his legacy like a ghost. Did James Carr die from a failing heart, or from a world that feared the power of his voice? Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson was pure electricity. Nicknamed Mr. Excitement, he could glide across the stage, drop to his knees, hit impossible high notes, and leave entire arenas screaming. His performances inspired artists like Michael Jackson, James Brown, and Elvis Presley. But behind the glamour, Jackie lived a life full of betrayal, financial exploitation, and constant battles with his management. Despite selling millions of records, he received only a fraction of his earnings due to predatory contracts. Still, he kept performing with unmatched passion. On September 29, 1975, during a live performance of Lonely Teardrops, Jackie suddenly collapsed mid-song. The crowd thought it was part of the act until he didn't get back up. What happened next raised more questions than answers. Moments before collapsing, Jackie told a crew member that his water tasted sweet and strange, which led some to suspect poisoning. When he passed out, there was a critical delay in medical response. No defibrillator was available, and paramedics took precious minutes to arrive, causing severe brain damage from lack of oxygen. A doctor later claimed Jackie could have survived if treated sooner. But the problems didn't end there. After being rushed to the hospital, his medical records were sealed and moved to a private archive. Even his family struggled to access information about his condition. Why hide the files? What was in them? No one would say. Jackie Wilson spent the next 9 years in a vegetative state, unable to speak or move. He was transferred to a rundown nursing home where he reportedly lay curled in a dark room, often forgotten. The music industry, who had made millions off his voice, offered almost no financial help. He couldn't afford proper care. Fans eventually wrote letters to newspapers demanding attention, shaming the industry into acknowledging him again. But it was too late. Jackie died on January 21, 1984, at only 49 years old, having spent nearly a decade trapped between life and death. Even his passing was quiet. No major tribute, no national memorial, no justice. To this day, the truth behind his collapse remains unclear. Was it exhaustion, poison negligence, or something darker involving those who controlled his career and money? Jackie Wilson gave everything to the stage, but when he needed help, the spotlight vanished. He was a legend who lit up the world, yet he died in the shadows, abandoned by the very industry he helped build. Minnie Riperton. Minnie Riperton was not just a singer, she was a vocal miracle. Known as the goddess of the octave, she possessed a 5-octave range that could soar higher than any instrument. Her timeless hit "Lovin' You" became an anthem of pure emotion, proving that gentleness could be more powerful than any scream. But behind her angelic voice lived a woman constantly pressured by the music industry to be perfect. At just 29 years old, Minnie was diagnosed with breast cancer. Instead of allowing her to rest and heal, insiders say her record label urged her to hide her illness to protect her marketability. She wore wigs, covered scars, and kept performing while undergoing treatment. To the public, she was radiant. In private, she was in pain. The industry valued her image more than her life. As her condition worsened, Minnie began writing deeply personal journal entries. She confessed her greatest fear was not death, but being forgotten. In one haunting line, she wrote, "I'm not afraid to go. I'm afraid of disappearing as if I never existed." She also recorded emotional voice memos and unreleased songs about legacy motherhood and mortality. She wanted to be honest with her fans, but those around her discouraged it. During her final studio sessions, she often sat alone with the lights off, holding her chest between takes. Still, her voice remained flawless. She wasn't just singing, she was leaving behind pieces of her soul. Shortly before she passed in 1979, Minnie recorded a final song meant to be released after her death as a message to the world. But that track was never shared. The record label locked it away, claiming it did not fit her brand. To this day, fans and even family members have never heard it. Some insiders believe the lyrics revealed how much pressure she felt to sacrifice her health for fame. Others say the song exposed the music industry's obsession with perfection. Either way, the world lost not just her voice, but her truth. Minnie Riperton died at 31 years old, surrounded by loved ones, but robbed of the chance to control her own story. Her passing left fans asking a painful question. Why was she forced to hide her suffering just to remain marketable? Was her career more valuable to the industry than her life? Minnie gave the world beauty beyond measure, yet the business she helped elevate refused to let her be human. Her legacy still soars in every whistle note, but the silence around her final message speaks even louder. David Ruffin. David Ruffin was the unmistakable voice behind My Girl, the anthem that defined an era. As the lead singer of The Temptations, he transformed Motown with raw passion, emotional grit, and a stage presence so magnetic that even his bandmates called him the soul of the group. But success brought conflict. Ruffin wanted more creative control, demanded fair credit, and refused to remain silent in a system that often exploited black artists. After leaving the group, he lived boldly outspoken, unpredictable but always brilliant. Even when battling addiction, his voice remained unmatched. In his final years, he claimed he had uncovered something powerful, telling a close friend, "I've got something that will shake them." Whatever he found never saw the light of day. On June 1, 1991, David Ruffin was reportedly dropped off at the entrance of a Philadelphia hospital unconscious with no ID and bruises around his neck. No one knows who brought him there. He was pronounced dead hours later. The official cause, drug overdose. Case closed. But nothing added up. Just the night before, he had performed at a nightclub and looked healthy. He was excited about a comeback tour. He had money in his pocket. Yet when he arrived at the hospital, his wallet was empty. His family insisted he did not take the massive dose of drugs found in his system. They believed he was forced or set up. Friends said the bruising on his neck suggested restraint or strangulation, not overdose. But authorities refused to investigate further. The mystery deepened when David's personal diary suddenly disappeared from his home. This journal reportedly contained names, events, and details about financial exploitation in the music business. It was never found. Shortly after his death, individuals attempted to access his estate and publishing rights. Some insiders whispered that Ruffin had been planning to reveal corruption both inside Motown and beyond. Was he silenced before he could speak? Despite being one of the greatest R&B voices in history, he died with no proper tribute, no major investigation, and no justice. His family still believes he was murdered. Former Temptations members agree something wasn't right. Fans around the world ask the same haunting question: how does a legend go from center stage to dying alone on the steps of a hospital? Florence Ballard. Florence Ballard was the true heart of the Supremes, the group that became Motown's most successful female act in history. She co-founded the trio Name Them and was originally the lead singer before being pushed aside for a more marketable image. With her powerful voice and radiant charm, she was built for stardom, but the industry was built on control. After internal conflicts, pressure from executives and favoritism toward Diana Ross, Florence was forced out of the group she created. She received a small payout, lost her royalties, and watched her former bandmates rise to global fame while she struggled to feed her children. The world thought she disappeared due to personal problems, but behind her downfall lay betrayal, exploitation, and a system that discarded her once she became inconvenient. In the years after her exit, Florence fell into poverty and depression, surviving on welfare and performing in small clubs just to keep the lights on. Yet she never stopped fighting. In 1974, she filed a lawsuit against Motown claiming she had been cheated out of millions. She won a modest settlement and began rebuilding her life. She got married, regained custody of her children, and started writing a tell-all memoir. Friends said the manuscript contained explosive revelations about favoritism, financial manipulation, and secrets Motown never wanted public. She told a reporter, "I'm going to tell the world what really happened." Florence was finally ready to take her story back. But just days before completing the book, something strange happened. Florence told relatives that pages of her manuscript had gone missing from her home. She believed someone had broken in. Shortly after, she became suddenly ill. On February 22, 1976, at only 32 years old, Florence Ballard was pronounced dead from an arterial blood clot or heart attack, depending on the source. There was no autopsy, no investigation. Her memoir was never found. The official narrative painted her as a tragic figure who couldn't handle success, ignoring the ruthless forces that stripped her of her career, her voice, and ultimately her life. Florence Ballard did not just fade away. She was cut out, silenced, and buried under other people's success. To this day, fans believe she knew something powerful, something worth hiding. Her death was labeled natural. But when a young, healthy woman with a story to expose dies, suddenly, is it really nature, or is it erasure? Tammy Terrell. Tammy Terrell wasn't just a voice, she was a spark of pure light in Motown's golden era. With her radiant smile and heavenly tone, she turned every duet with Marvin Gaye into magic. Songs like Ain't No Mountain High Enough and Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing became timeless anthems of love and unity. Audiences saw perfection, but behind the scenes, Tammy lived in constant pain physically, emotionally, and silently. She suffered from abusive relationships, most notably from singer James Brown and boxer Ernie Terrell. Friends and producers confirmed she often arrived at the studio with bruises, yet Motown insisted she continue performing. Her health deteriorated, but the show always had to go on. In 1967, during a live performance with Marvin Gaye, Tammy suddenly collapsed on stage into his arms. The crowd gasped. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors discovered a malignant brain tumor. She underwent 8 surgeries, but her condition kept worsening. However, what raised suspicion was how little protection she received. Despite her fragile state, her management continued booking her for appearances. Some insiders claimed that earlier head trauma from abuse may have accelerated the tumor's growth. Yet no one was ever investigated or held responsible. Tammy spent her final years in a wheelchair, fading away while Motown stayed mostly silent. Before her death, Tammy kept private journals describing pressure from the industry and the pain she hid from the public. She reportedly wrote, "They love my voice, but not my truth." Those journals were never published. Some entries mysteriously disappeared after her passing. Marvin Gaye was devastated and later said in an interview, "I believe she was murdered not by one person, but by the system." That quote was later removed from many publications. On March 16, 1970, at only 24 years old, Tammy Terrell died. The official cause was complications from a brain tumor, but many close to her believed the stress, exploitation, and violence she endured pushed her body to the edge. There was no major Motown tribute, no justice, no investigation. Her death wasn't just tragic, it was avoidable. Tammy Terrell didn't simply lose a battle with illness. She was failed by the men who hurt her, the machine that used her, and an industry that saw her voice as more valuable than her life. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke wasn't just a star, he was a revolution. With hits like A Change Is Gonna Come, he became the voice of the civil rights movement and the first black artist to own his publishing, his masters, and his label. In an era when the music industry treated black talent like property, Sam built his own empire. That made him dangerous. He was intelligent, fearless, and financially independent, something powerful people did not want. He publicly challenged racism, supported black businesses, and planned to expose corruption within the music industry. One colleague stated Sam was about to do something huge, and they knew it. Then came the night of December 11, 1964. Sam checked into the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles with a woman named Elisa Boyer. Minutes later, she ran out of the room claiming he was kidnapping her, yet she left with his clothes, money, and wallet. Confused and wearing only a sports coat, Sam ran to the motel office demanding answers. Inside was the manager Bertha Franklin, who claimed Sam attacked her so she shot him in self-defense. But the details don't match. He was shot 3 times, including once in the chest at close range. His head was badly injured, face bruised, and one shoe missing signs of a struggle. Witnesses said they heard multiple voices in the room before the gunshot. Yet neither woman was ever charged or fully investigated. Even stranger, the LAPD wrapped the case in 48 hours and ruled it justifiable homicide. No autopsy inquest, no deeper questioning. Case closed. His family insisted he was murdered. Friends said he had files and documents he planned to publish about the exploitation of black artists. After his death, those files disappeared. His business dealings were taken over. His royalties went missing. The man who fought for ownership suddenly owned nothing. Years later, investigators discovered that Bertha Franklin had ties to organized crime and Sam Cooke's record label executives. Coincidence or coordination? Sam Cooke was only 33 years old. He changed music forever. He funded the fight for black freedom. And when he gained too much power, he died in a motel under impossible circumstances. Otis Redding. Otis Redding was not just a singer, he was the heartbeat of soul. His voice was raw thunder, his passion unmatched, and his influence undeniable. With classics like Try a Little Tenderness and Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, he became the bridge between gospel roots and mainstream success. By 26, he was already being called the next king of soul and was on the edge of total superstardom. But behind his success, Otis was doing something rare. He wanted independence. He had started his own label, his own publishing company, and was helping other black artists own their music. At a time when the industry thrived on control, Otis Redding was becoming unstoppable. And then, everything ended. On December 10, 1967, Otis boarded his personal Beechcraft plane with his band, the Bar-Kays, headed to a performance in Wisconsin. The weather was cold but clear. The pilot was highly experienced. The aircraft had no major mechanical issues. Yet only minutes before landing, radio contact was suddenly lost, and the plane plunged into frozen Lake Monona. 7 people died instantly, only 1 band member survived. The official cause, pilot error in poor weather, despite multiple reports stating visibility was adequate and no distress signal was sent. Even the survivor said, "It felt like something went wrong in the air, not the weather." What makes the crash even more suspicious is what happened right before it. Otis had just finished recording his most groundbreaking song, Dock of the Bay, which hinted at change and inner conflict. Some believe he was preparing to confront the industry or shift his career in a bold new direction. There were also rumors of tension with powerful figures over ownership of his music. After his death, some of his business moves were quietly reversed and control of his catalog shifted away from his family. Even stranger Otis's final recordings were altered and posthumously released without his approval, and one final project he discussed before his death was never found. To this day, fans and historians question how a healthy young star flying a routine route with an expert pilot in reasonable weather could suddenly fall out of the sky with no mechanical explanation. Otis Redding was more than a legend. He was on the verge of changing the balance of power in music. And just like other black artists who reached for full control, his journey ended in mysterious accident. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye wasn't just the Prince of Motown, he was the man who transformed R&B into a voice of truth. From sensual classics like Let's Get It On to political masterpieces like What's Going On, he proved black music could be poetic, spiritual, rebellious, and revolutionary. But greatness came with a price. He battled depression, addiction, and deep trauma from growing up with an abusive, controlling father who was also a preacher. Marvin lived in constant conflict between faith and desire, fame and freedom, love and betrayal. By the early 1980s, he had rebuilt himself after bankruptcy and addiction. He was planning a career revival and had just released Sexual Healing, a global hit. But something darker was happening behind the scenes. In his final interviews, Marvin made chilling statements. "Someone is trying to destroy me. I won't live to see my next birthday." He also hinted at industry corruption, exploitation, and secrets he planned to expose in a book. He became paranoid not only about strangers but people in his own home. He was particularly afraid of his father, with whom he had a toxic relationship. On April 1, 1984, the unthinkable happened. During a heated argument, Marvin Gaye Sr. shot Marvin twice, killing him instantly. With a gun Marvin himself had given him months earlier. The world was told it was a domestic dispute. But many things didn't add up. Why was the gun already loaded? Why did Marvin's father show no emotion, even admitting he didn't know why he pulled the trigger? Why did the court reduce the charge to voluntary manslaughter, resulting in no prison time? Why were Marvin's documents and tapes removed from the house before police arrived? Friends believed Marvin knew too much. He was battling Motown over unpaid royalties and attempting to gain control of his catalog. Some insiders claimed he was working on a project exposing how the industry used and discarded black artists. Was his death purely family tragedy? or something orchestrated using the easiest scapegoat. His father, Marvin Gaye, died the day before his 45th birthday. The man who asked, "What's going on?" may have found the answer and paid with his life. His voice lives forever, but the truth behind his death still silenced. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was more than the king of pop. He was the most powerful black entertainer the world had ever seen. He broke MTV's color barrier, sold over 1 billion records, and redefined performance art with albums like Thriller and Bad. But the biggest threat he posed wasn't just his talent, it was his ownership. Michael was the first black artist to own his masters, launch his own label, and even purchase the Beatles' catalog. In 1995, he merged his company with Sony to create Sony ATV, owning 50% of one of the most valuable music libraries in history. Behind the scenes, he was preparing to buy back the remaining 50%, which meant Michael Jackson would control the music industry itself. And that was the moment his life became dangerous. In 2009, he announced his massive This Is It comeback tour, 50 sold-out shows in London, record-breaking before they even began. But those close to him said Michael was being pushed beyond his physical limit, working endless hours with little rest. The concert promoters hired Dr. Conrad Murray, a physician Michael did not personally choose. Under Murray's care, Michael was given propofol, a surgical anesthetic, never meant to be used at home. On June 25, 2009, Michael was found unconscious in his bedroom. From the moment he stopped breathing, everything went wrong. CPR was done on a bed instead of the floor. 911 was called too late, and critical medical equipment was missing. Murray later claimed he left Michael alone while on propofol, something no trained doctor would ever do. Michael had been sounding alarms in his final weeks. He told friends and family, "They're going to kill me. If anything happens to me, don't believe it was an accident." Who were they? He was in legal battles with Sony, fighting over the value of his catalog and attempting to regain full ownership of his music. Within months of his death, Sony signed a $750 million deal, profiting from the very catalog Michael was trying to reclaim. Even stranger, after his death, security footage vanished. His bedroom was cleaned before police arrived, and the investigation focused only on Dr. Murray, never on the people who hired him or stood to gain billions. Michael Jackson died at 50 years old, preparing to reclaim his throne and expose the industry that used him. The official story says accidental overdose, but the facts show pressure, negligence, missing evidence, and profit for everyone except him. So we must ask, did Michael die from propofol or from power? Because legends with that much influence don't just fall. Sometimes they are pushed. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was more than a superstar. She was the voice of a generation. With over 200 million records sold, 7 consecutive #1 hits, and a vocal range unmatched in history, she became known as The Voice. But behind the flawless image, Whitney lived under crushing expectations. She was forced to be the perfect black female icon, elegant, controlled, marketable, while burying her true identity, sexuality, and emotional pain. The media called her troubled, but rarely spoke about the pressure, exploitation, and manipulation she faced from the industry and even people in her own circle. By 2012, Whitney was ready to rebuild her life. She had film roles waiting, new music planned, and told friends, "I'm taking control again." She was preparing a comeback, not a collapse. On February 11, 2012, Whitney was found face down in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The official cause, accidental drowning with contributing drug use. But the autopsy revealed disturbing details: bruises on her forehead, arms, and back, a cut lip, and a wound on her scalp suggesting possible impact or struggle. Even more suspicious, the bathwater was nearly boiling hot, hot enough to burn skin. Why would she willingly enter scalding water? Who ran the bath? Why was her body repositioned before authorities arrived? Witnesses heard a loud thud before she was discovered, yet no one investigated signs of foul play. Surveillance footage went missing. Key witnesses changed their stories. Within 48 hours, the case was closed. After her death, the business machine moved quickly. Unreleased music was seized, tribute albums launched overnight, and insurance payouts flowed. Projects Whitney planned to control were reassigned to others. The same industry that abandoned her in life suddenly profited from her death. Family members began to suspect a darker truth: Whitney was worth more dead than alive. Friends reported that she believed she was being watched, controlled, and financially drained. One confidant said, "She didn't die from drugs, she died from the people around her." The deeper you look, the more the accident explanation feels like a shield. Whitney Houston did not simply self-destruct. She fought addiction, heartbreak, and a system that wanted her voice, but not her freedom. She tried to reclaim her power, and days later she was gone. Her death was ruled an accident, but the bruises, silence, missing footage, and sudden profits tell another story. When legends try to rise again, the forces holding them down don't always let them. Whitney Houston didn't just drown in a bathtub, she drowned in secrets, pressure, and a world that refused to let her live her truth. Their voices built empires, yet their final moments were filled with silence, secrecy, and unanswered questions. From Jesse Belvin's accident after death threats to Sam Cooke's impossible shooting to Whitney Houston's bruises in a bathtub, too many Black R&B legends died in ways that don't make sense. Were these tragedies simply fate, or patterns hidden in plain sight? When artists gained power, independence, or tried to speak truth, the world suddenly lost them. Coincidence or control? Do we accept the official stories, or dare to demand the truth they were never allowed to tell?